No, Mr. McIntosh.
Witness this afternoon is Colin Purdon.
Good afternoon, Mr. Purdon. As you will understand, you're about to be asked questions by Mr. McIntosh, who's sitting opposite. First of all, I would ask you I'm not sure whether you would prefer to take the oath or the affirmation.
The affirmation.
Affirmation, right. Sitting where you are, would you repeat these words after me? I solemnly, sincerely, and truly
I solemnly, sincerely, and truly
declare and affirm
declare and affirm
that I will tell the truth,
that I will tell the truth,
the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
and nothing but the truth.
Thank you, Mr. Purdon. Now, we usually sit in the afternoon between 2 and 4, may go beyond 4 if that's necessary. I don't plan to take a break, but if at any stage in your evidence you, for whatever reason, you want to take a break, just give me an indication and we'll do that. Now, Mr. McIntosh.
Thank you, my lord.
Thank you.
Can I ask your full name and your occupation?
My name is Colin George Purdon, and I'm currently Head of Estates at NHS Golden Jubilee.
Now, I suppose the first question is, you produced a written statement.
Yes.
Are you happy for that to be adopted as part of your evidence?
Yes.
Thank you. Now, you mentioned that you're currently working at the Golden Jubilee. Is that part of NHS Greater Glasgow or a separate trust?
It's a separate trust.
Thank you. Now, when you worked at NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde, where were you working in 2015 at the start of that year?
At the start of 2015, I was working at the Royal Alexandra Hospital in Paisley.
And that would be in the Clyde sector?
That's correct, yes.
And did you come to move to the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital in August of 2015?
Yes, I did.
And what was the first role that you had there?
The first role was as a senior estates manager, and I looked after what was termed the retained estate.
So would that have been all the buildings on site that weren't built by Multiplex Brookfield and the laboratory block?
Yes, so all of the older buildings
Yes.
that were part of the Southern General Hospital, but I also had the laboratory block, which was built by Multiplex. That was under my remit, and the teaching and learning centre and office building. So those were newer buildings, but they formed part of the retained estate.
Thank you. When did you...
And can you just help me with geography? Thinking in relation to the new adults and children's hospital, there's a block which is absolutely opposite it, maybe, I don't know, 30 meters away. That includes administration offices, as I understand. Does it also include the laboratory?
It does, yes.
Right. Thank you.
Now, in your first role, you were responsible for retained estate and the laboratory block and some other buildings. And then did you move in December 2018 to a more senior role?
Yes.
What was that?
That was an interim role as the sector estates manager for the South sector.
And that's the whole of the South sector?
That's correct.
And that'd be more than just the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital campus?
Well, no, it encompasses the whole campus.
So does it encompass any other hospitals?
No other hospitals or off-site properties.
So it's just the campus
Just
itself,
the campus, yeah.
both retained and new build?
Yes.
And you started there in December 18, and when did you finish that role?
February 2020.
And then you were promoted again?
It was, yes, it was promoted again. It was a seconded role I was in as the interim, just a temporary role, and I was awarded a full-time role within the Clyde sector at that time.
You weren't assistant heads of estates at one point?
Yes, that was a new title that was given to that role.
So when you were assistant head of estates, did you have responsibility for the Queen Elizabeth Hospital?
No, I was, during my time at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, I was the interim sector estates manager.
So you were only at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital from August 15 to February 2020?
Yes.
Right, that's good to clarify that. Now, what I want to do is start initially with that first 2.5 years, 3.5 years, August 15 to December 18. And when you were managing the retained estate, what role did you have in obtaining L8 risk assessments for the buildings you were managing?
The early risk assessments were already in place when I took up the role. So those had already been established. The assessments had been done, were documented and delivered back to NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde.
Because we've heard some evidence that the L8 risk assessment for the retained estate was done in 2016. That sound correct to you?
It may be an update or a review of the risk assessment that was done at that time.
And how often should a risk assessment be repeated or reviewed?
Depending on whether any major work had been carried out to a water system or any major changes in legislation, then the risk assessment would be reviewed.
So how often would that practically mean for a building that's not changing?
It could be 2 to 3 years.
Would it surprise you that there's been evidence that the L8 risk assessment for the retained estate from 2016 wasn't updated till 2021?
Yeah, it would surprise me, yeah.
Now, who was the senior estates manager, effectively your line manager, when you were working in the retained estate?
Ian Powdery.
Right. And would he have been sector estates manager or a different title?
Yes, he was the sector estates manager for South at that time.
So you effectively stepped into his job when you were promoted?
Not exactly. So I think Ian, I'm not clear on timelines and when this actually happened, but Ian had actually moved out of that role and had moved to Clyde for a period of time, and Andy Wilson had taken over.
So you replaced Andy Wilson, who had previously replaced Mr. Parry?
Yes.
In simple terms?
Yes. So, Ian Powdery was the sector estates manager. He moved to Clyde when Andy joined the organisation, and Andy took over as the sector estates manager. Andy subsequently moved to Clyde, and Ian came back. And when Ian retired in late 2017, early 2018, I took over.
So you took over from Ian Parry, that's what I want to be clear about?
Yes.
Right, okay. Now, when you took over responsibility for the laboratory block in August of 2015, it'd been built for a couple of years at that point, hadn't it?
Yes, it had.
Yeah. Would you have been able to access the commissioning and validation results for that building on the ZootTech system?
I would have been, yes.
And did you see them?
I don't recall ever having looked for them, to be honest.
Okay. Now, in your statement, we asked you some questions about validation, and you explained that you don't have knowledge of validation. But whilst preparing for this, I noticed that you're discussed as a possible someone to be present during a validation, and I want to just put something to you. This is bundle 12, page 418. So this appears to be an email thread. And if you go down to the bottom of the page, you see there's an email from Jackie Ballamori on the 3rd September at 09:45. If we go on to the next page, we see the text. And you're not copied in and it's not sent to you, but it says, the subject is air permeability validation, July 15. And then it mentions, can I ask you to contact estates to send a representative, perhaps David Bratty or Colin Purdon? Were you ever asked to do this work?
No.
No. Had you been... Oh, the screen's not working.
Okay.
What I'll do is I'll move to a section that doesn't require this document, and we'll come back to this.
Okay.
So we'll do some stuff without documents. So what I want to do is ask you about the ZootTech system in isolation. Did you have occasion to use the ZootTech system when you worked at Queen Elizabeth?
Yes.
And what do you understand it's for?
The ZootTech system was a cloud-based document vault, basically. So it held all of the documents that were generated during the construction phase of the laboratory building and the adult and children's hospitals.
And so as far as you're aware, did it contain all the documents you would expect it to have contained?
I couldn't say if it contained all of the documents. There are thousands.
Were there ever times when you went to look for documents and they weren't there?
Yes.
And what sort of documents weren't there?
Drawings, schematics, quite a few documents. probably best to clarify, it's maybe not a case that they weren't there, but they were very difficult to find.
Ah, I see, that's helpful, right. Now, if we can go back to the document I was just showing at page 419 of bundle 12, which hopefully shall now appear on the
Can I
screen.
take it that the documents are now visible?
They're not
Right.
visible yet. It's just me at the moment. No. No, there's nothing on the screens. I'll move on to something else that doesn't require the document. I want to understand whether you're a trained authorised person of water.
No, not an authorised person, no.
Okay, right. When you arrived on site as the manager of the retained estate, were you aware of there being appointed authorised persons and for the site?
No, I'd say I wasn't aware of who they were when I arrived on site.
When did you become aware of who they were?
I can't recall.
When you say you weren't aware of them, were you aware or not aware as to whether there were authorised persons?
I couldn't say who had been appointed as authorised persons.
Well, that's my question. Is it, were you aware that anybody had been appointed an authorised person?
No.
Right. Thank you.
From your point of view as a manager, what impact does it have on what you're responsible for if there's no authorised person for the building you're managing?
It makes it difficult to assess certain situations in relation to water safety. So you require a trained, competent person to manage the system, and the authorised person would be the person that you would go to.
So if there wasn't an authorised person for a building you were managing, presumably you'd go and get one appointed and make a fuss about it.
Yes.
Did you in your case?
I can't recall.
So if the fact that there wasn't an authorised person appointed, well, when the documents come back, I'm going to show you a document, but I'm going to move on to something else at the moment. Well, let's see if we can get a document up. We're going to go and look at bundle 18, volume 2, page 872. 870. Nope, bundle 18, volume 2, page 870. No. Yes, that one. So, have you seen this written scheme for Legionella control from December 2016 before?
I believe I may have seen this, yes.
Yes. Could I ask you to step forward a couple of pages? One more. And two more after this. Yes, this page here. So this appears to be the hierarchy appointment table in a written scheme in an update in December 2016. And it appears to identify you as the person responsible for, or deputy responsible person for water. Do you see that?
Yes.
And the authorised person for the new build is Jim Guthrie. But there's no authorised person for the retained estate.
No.
Would it have been your responsibility to encourage someone to appoint someone?
Yes.
Yes. But there wasn't someone at that point.
I can't recall who would have been the
it's been suggested in your statement you describe receiving the 2015 DMA Canyon L8 Legionella assessment at some point in 2016. I need to ask more questions about how you received it. Can you help us about whether you received a hard copy or electronically?
I can't recall receiving it. I don't recall whether it was a hard copy that was presented at a meeting, or whether it was emailed to me.
Okay, well, could I ask you, before we ask some more questions about that, I need you to look at Bundle 25, Document 35, page 678. Yes. So this is a letter which we heard evidence from Mr. Watson of DMA Canyon yesterday that bears to be addressed to you on the 8th of November 2016. Have you seen this letter before? We asked you to look at it the day before yesterday.
I think so, yes.
Yes. So it appears to be a quotation from DMA Canyon for updating their risk assessment for the adult hospital. Would you agree with me?
Yes.
And therefore, Mr. Watson's view is that somebody, presumably you, but I suppose potentially Mr. Parry, must have asked him to provide this quote.
Yes.
Do you remember that?
I don't specifically remember asking for the quote, but I don't dispute the content of the letter.
Right. Now, at this point in November 2016, you were still only a manager for the retained estate.
Yes.
So why would you be receiving a quote for the new build building?
I'm not entirely sure. I may have volunteered to contact DMA and obtain a quote.
And if you were receiving a quote on the 8th of November 16 for a updated report, do you think it's possible that as part of the events before this quote was sent, you received the 2016 report? The original 2015 report?
I'm not sure.
Well, okay, let's work this through. You're being sent a quote to update the L8 risk assessment for the hospital. Do you think it's possible that in the weeks before this letter arrived by email, you had seen the 2015 DMA Canyon L8 risk assessment, the one that's to be updated?
Yes, it's possible.
Could that be the instant you're talking about in your statement, but you can't remember how you got it?
Yes.
Right. I think I should put to you that because Mr. Parry is copied into this, that this couldn't be you acting by yourself. That he or other members of the team must also have been aware that you were getting a quote to update the risk assessment. Would you agree with that?
I would.
Right. Was the work actually done at this point?
I couldn't confirm that.
Well, if we can look at the actual follow-up report, which is in Bundle 6, page 122. Sorry, page 146, 416.
The time I thought, Ms. McIntosh, it's the bundle number for the letter of the 8th of November.
Now, this is a new bundle, Bundle 6.
Yeah, yes, we're now in Bundle 6.
Yes, Bundle 6,
sorry.
page 416. 416. The previous one. The previous one is
Time I thought.
Bundle 25,
Thank you.
Document 25, Document 35, page 678.
Thank you very much.
Now,
Sorry about that.
My lord, this letter this document at 416 bears to record a site survey happening in September 2017. Do you see that?
Yes.
And the letter we've just shown you is November 2016. Are you able to help us about why it took from November 16 to September 17 for the reassessment that you were quoted about to actually take place?
I could only assume that it is a large system, it's a large hospital, and it would have taken a significant amount of time to complete the risk assessment.
Well, Mr. Watson's evidence is that the work started soon before the 8th of September. It didn't start in 2016, it started in 2017. Why would it have taken some matter of more than a few months to go from a quote to having the work done?
I don't have an explanation for that.
Could it be that you were helping out with aspects of the management of the new building while your primary responsibility was the retained estate?
Yes, it could be.
Yeah. And in that work with the new building, somehow you came to either be volunteered or volunteer to obtain this quote.
Yes.
Yes. Having obtained the quote, whose responsibility would it have been to decide whether to carry out the work at that price?
I would say either David Bratty or Ian Powdery.
So we should ask them.
Yes.
But from your point of view, what did you think when you saw the DMA Canyon 2015 report at some point in 2016 about what it was saying about the water system of the new hospital?
I didn't read it in detail, and I think the reason I didn't do that is because it wasn't directly. I wasn't directly involved in the adult and children's hospitals.
But Mr. Purdon, you were sufficiently involved to receive the quote. So you presumably knew the scope of the work to get a quote. Do you accept that?
Yes.
And so could it be that you had to read some of the report in order to realise that more work needed to be repeated?
Yes.
Could we look at the report, which is on page 122? Now, if we just stick in the first few pages, if we go to page 137, do you see how this is the second page of the Legionella risk assessment with a number of high risks entries?
Yes.
It's on page 16 of the document. You can see in the bottom right-hand corner. We go back to the previous page. Sorry, page 1636. We see more detail about the hospital system. And if we go forward to page 142, we get a series, and there are lots of these, of pages with red flags against remedial action categories.
Yes.
I put it to you that in order to obtain the quote, you must have noticed that there were high levels of red flags in this document.
Yes.
So what did you do about it?
I can't say that I did anything directly. All I can say is that my remit was the retained estate at that time, and that was the focus of my duties. I probably assumed that others were tasked with ensuring that these remedial actions were carried out.
Okay, if we could move on to 2018. In 2018, you were asked to help with certain events in what some people call the water incident. Is that something you recollect?
Yes, I do.
What do you understand to be the water incident?
The water incident was, I believe, a series of gram-negative bacteria infections in patients within Ward 2A. That started off a series of IMT meetings.
And roughly what point in 2018 is this?
This would be early 2018, I think it was February.
Right. And was a water technical group set up as a consequence of an IMT?
It was, yes, later in 2018.
And in fact, if we go to bundle 1, page 63, do we see an IMT on the 12th of March 2018, which you are present at, chaired by Dr. Easter, which reports an update on the incident in the third paragraph?
Yes.
And could that have been the IMT that set up the water technical group?
It could have been. I don't recall exactly when the water technical group was requested.
And what I want to do is to look at some of the entries in this. If we could scroll down to the bottom half of the page, and over onto the second page. It says control measures. Due to the number of positive results which came back, emergency measures were put in place on a Friday evening, which include the following: all showers out of use for patients, sterile water for drinking, bottled water for washing and bathing. For younger patients, white will be provided for washing. Now, whilst I appreciate that at the time you saw the DMA Canyon report, you were the manager for the retained estate, do you think this might have been a good time to mention the 2015 Legionella assessment that you'd seen?
Yes, it would.
But you didn't mention it at this point.
I can't recall.
Well, it's not minuted, and it appears from other documents that senior management of the health board don't discover the report until the early part of July, late June of this year. So we're in March. Sorry, we're in March, and unless someone tells them, they don't know about it, and you didn't tell them. No. Can we look, please, at the Bundle 10, Document 1, which is the Water Technical Group's first meeting minute. Now, before we go into the detail in here, I'd like to understand what everyone's doing in this meeting, because I understand it's chaired by Marianne Kane. Mr. McLaughlin from HFS is present. Annette Rankin from HPS is present, and they're external to the health board.
Yes.
Yes. And then there's yourself, along with Mr. Gallagher.
Yes.
Now, he's not on the operations side of estates.
No.
What does the corporate side of estates do in this context?
Corporate side looks at compliance and training.
So why would a general manager state in charge of compliance be present at a water technical meeting about an outbreak, potential outbreak?
Alan Gallagher was a senior manager at the time, general manager, and I can only assume would have been brought in for his experience and the fact that this may have been a compliance issue.
Right, well, we'll ask him more when we see him. Right. And then we've got Mr. Parry there and yourself. Why is it necessary to have both of you?
I had been in attendance at most of the IMT meetings. I had taken a number of actions from those. I think because I had been involved in working through the incident, I was brought into the Water Technical Group to look at it in a bit more detail.
Now, as we see at the bottom of the screen, the subject of the Horn Optitherm taps came up.
Yes.
And there's a discussion about why there might be contamination of the taps. Do you remember that?
Vaguely remember that, yes.
Did you have any awareness of a meeting taking place before you arrived in 2014 about the Horn Optitherm taps and how they should be, whether they should be used and whether they should be maintained, how they should be maintained?
No.
Is that something you've been aware of?
No.
Can I just double check by showing you a document? It's Bundle 15, page 692. We will come back to this one. So this is a minute we have from the 4th of June 2014 of a meeting which you're not present at. Although to be fair, Mr. Gallagher is, and Mr. Parry is. And if we scroll to the end of the minute, over the page, and keep going past the discussion, at the very end, South Glasgow Hospital, there we are. Do you see how there's a discussion, action arising, which is described at the bottom of 5.3 as there was no need to apply additional flow control facilities or remove flow straighteners, and any residual perceived or potential risks will be formed part of the routine management process.
I see that, yes.
Yeah, now obviously you haven't seen this before.
No.
But were you aware back in 2018 of any routine management processes being carried out in respect to the Horn Optitherm taps?
No.
Was there any instruction to you to have them cleaned in a particular way at a particular frequency?
Prior to 2018?
Yes.
No.
During 2018?
I think after the incident, when we looked at these taps in a bit more detail, there were decisions made about the flow straighteners and how they had to be exchanged on a regular basis.
But before then there wasn't?
No.
No. Okay. Now if we go back to the Water Technical Bundle, which is Bundle 10, and look at page 9, please. Now, this is another meeting of the Water Technical Group on the 13th of April. You're recorded as being present with Mr. Parry and Mr. Gallagher, along with other people. If we could go to page 10, there's discussion. I want to see if you recollect this Just going to get my own note. Yes. Do you see how there's a section which begins agreed to?
Yes.
And then below that, there is a centre paragraph that begins the group ask aware.
Yes.
And then below the 2 bullet points, it was noted that every floor had positive and negative readings. Thereby, this would indicate a widespread water infection.
I see that, yes.
Do you remember that being discussed?
I don't recall it.
What's the system in a IMT or a water technical group where minutes are circulated? If you don't agree with the minutes,
you should make any corrections.
did you attempt to correct these minutes?
I don't recall.
Well, from your point of view, looking back at it now, would the inquiry be entitled to work on the basis that this is an accurate description of what was discussed at the meeting?
Sorry, I don't really understand.
So it's a minute that records what was discussed at the meeting. Are we entitled to rely on it as a record of what was discussed at the meeting, or would you say something else happened?
Yes, it should be an accurate
But you don't
record.
remember?
Should be an accurate record.
Okay. Can we go to page 14, please? This is another meeting. This was on the 20th of April. I see you're present along with Ian Parry and others. At the bottom of the page, it begins way forward. And the minute records every floor is showing some contamination with various species, so we can assume there was widespread contamination in the buildings. Our review of the commissioning data indicates there was a TVC which is off the scale, but now need to determine the way forward and solution to the contamination. I want to ask you a couple of questions about this. Firstly, what do you understand to be the meaning of contamination in the context of water?
Contamination would be anything within the water system. That could be foreign debris or bacteria that's out of normal levels that you would expect to see.
So it's been suggested by others that contamination is only really chemicals, and that if there's bacteria and microorganisms, actually the correct term is colonization. Is that something you've heard of? Or
yes.
Heard of that. So you'd see them as also synonyms?
Yes.
Right. Now, again, do you remember this discussion happening?
Just that I heard that correctly. Contamination in this context, contamination can be regarded as
A synonym to colonization?
Yes.
In your mind?
Yes.
Right.
Thank you.
Do you remember this meeting?
Not specifically, no.
Do you remember this awareness that I'm pointing you to of a concern about contamination coming up in these meetings?
Yes.
Yes. And so that was a view that was taken by some people?
Yes, absolutely.
What role can out of temperature range, hot and cold water play in the growth of microorganisms in water?
Temperature is the primary control measure for bacteria in water systems. So within a hot water system, you want to keep it as hot as possible within a safe range, so above 50 degrees, and in cold water below 20 to stop proliferation.
If you're managing a water system and you find evidence that there's out of temperature readings in particular locations or particular systems, is that something you should act on?
Yes.
Why didn't you act on that when you read it in the 2015 DMA Canyon report?
I can't explain that.
Was there a system in place at the time, that's late 2016-17, which, as it were, would have caught the contents of the DMA Canyon report before it had to rely on you seeing it by chance?
I don't think it solely relied on me.
No, I don't think it did. That's what I'm trying to find out. But before it got to you, it wasn't picked up. Was there a system that should have picked it up?
I don't know that any system was in place that would have picked that up. I can only make an assumption that when the risk assessment was submitted, it should have been read and discussed and an action plan drawn up.
So in effect, the system then, to the extent that it's a system, relies on people reacting to documents they're sent.
Yes.
Or conversations they have, or phone calls.
Yes.
And there wasn't a management system then in place to prompt them to react.
I don't believe so.
It was there by the time you left.
Yes.
And what was it called?
What was the system called?
Yes,
Well, either the water safety plan or the written scheme.
written scheme. And was there a management software for facilities management that would have also prompted actions by members of staff?
Are you referring to the FM First, the
Yes.
computer-aided facilities management system? Yeah, that system was in place.
Was that in place in 2015?
Yes.
But maybe not working.
Maybe not working to its full potential.
Yes. Now, I want to look at the question of what the water technical group members knew about the DMA Canyon 2015 risk assessment. Do you think they knew about it?
The water technical group?
Yes.
Yes, I believe it was tabled at some point. I couldn't recall which meeting.
It might have been tabled in June or July after it had been discovered. But in the first 4 or 5 months of its existence, do you think the members knew about it?
I couldn't say.
B, you knew about it?
Yes, I suppose I did, yes.
Yeah. Now, I want to look at the question of debris found in tanks, because you raise it in one of your responses. And I want to check that your answer at question 139, and we're talking about the same piece of debris, because it would be helpful. So if we just look at your statement, page 139. Sorry, it's not page 139. Question 139, which is page 181. At the bottom of this page, you make reference to a cleaning sponge being found in the tank.
Yes.
Now, I found a report, an Intertech report, so I want to see if it's the same sponge. At least it tells us whether it's one sponge or 2 sponges.
Okay. So
that is at bundle 6, page 645. So this is some photographs of an Intertech report that was taken in the report dates back to July 2018. Do you think this could be the same sponge we're talking about?
Yes, I believe it is.
Right. Do you recognise it, in fact?
I do. I also recognise the writing on the bubble wrap. That's my writing.
Oh, right. Well, that's extremely helpful. So we've nailed that down. And this is in the summer of 2018, June, July.
Yes.
Would this have been after the existence of the 2015 DMA Canyon report had come to wider knowledge?
I believe so.
Yeah. Okay. Right. Now, in paragraph 94 of your statement, which is on page 165, you're asked about sterilization of the water system. Now, obviously, you reminded us that Mr. Kelly, Dr. Mackin, and Mr. Wafer were involved in fitting the chlorine dioxide system. But I wanted to ask you some practical questions as a manager. What are the differences between running a water system in a hospital where the primary control is temperature or filtration, and one where you add on chlorine dioxide? From your point of view, what difference does it make to management?
So I think what you're asking is the chlorine dioxide, I would say it's a secondary control measure.
Right.
So if temperature is not sufficient and you have incidences where you have bacterial growth or repeated bacterial growth, then you need to look at a secondary control measure, which is where chlorine dioxide was brought in.
And does it impose any particular management problems for the user, as it were?
It does. There are additional tasks that need to be carried out in order to monitor the chlorine dioxide dosing plant and also the levels of chlorine dioxide in the system.
So why do you need to monitor the levels in the system?
You need to keep it within safe levels. So to keep it within safe drinking water levels, it needs to be below 0.5 parts per million.
And do you also need to make sure it reaches sufficient concentration in taps long distances from the the plant room?
Yes, that's correct.
And how would you do that?
By remote monitoring. So you can take water samples from remote locations and test it on site to establish what the levels are.
And you'd have to have a system for that.
Yes.
Right. I'm going to turn now to the decant of Ward 2A, 2B of the Chehalis unit to Ward 6A in September 2018. We can take that off the screen. When did you first learn there was going to be a decant?
I can't recall exactly.
Well, let's look at your question, your questionnaire responses. Question response 158A, and that's on page 190. So you've stated there that I recall that after a patient infection suspected to be linked to bacteria in the water system, after a decision taken by the IMT, the patients were to be transferred to 4B and 6A. So I want to just check why you thought the decision was made by an IMT.
It was a collective decision. That's the role of the IMT group. That has clinicians, consultants, it has infection control, a microbiologist. It's a group decision. It's not something that an individual would take on themselves.
I appreciate that. We have an alternative document we want to show to you, which is Bundle 19, page 614. Now, this bears to be a draft meeting note, of a water review meeting. Now, back in 2018, were you aware of the existence of a water review meeting?
I can't recall that.
I mean, you weren't there in your defence.
No.
No. And the reason I wanted to explore why you think the decision was the IMT is because of what this minute says. If we could go on to the second page, that's page 615. And the heading decant of 2A, 2B, and 4B. And it says, it was agreed that due to the biofilm being found in some sink areas in this ward and the patient demographic, it would be appropriate to decant this patient group to another area in order to carry out investigatory works and get to the bottom of this problem. And if we look back at the previous page at those present at this meeting, does it seem this might have been the organisation, the group that made the decision?
I think this was a discussion about a decision that had been made, so it was maybe recorded at this meeting.
Right, okay. Well, let's go and look at the IMT meeting that relates to this. Were you at the IMT meeting on the 18th of September that followed the decision, or was at the decision, which is page which is page 365? So it's bundle 1, page 365, my mistake. Now, you're not present at this meeting?
No.
No. And if we could scroll down to further down in the note. Well, first look at the time of the meeting. The meeting time is at 2 o'clock on the 18th of September. So you weren't at this meeting. Well, let's ask you one you were at. So the previous meeting is on the 13th September, and that's on page 360. So were you at this meeting?
Yes.
Yes. And there seems to be a discussion about various aspects of the investigation, which I won't go into with you today. But if we go on to the second page, which is page 362, the headline is Risk Management Control Measures. And you see it says draft appraisals option paper is being developed to an alternative accommodation in 6A be required for a group of patients.
Yes.
This will be taken to senior executive management.
Yes.
Do you remember that happening?
I don't recall that.
Well, perhaps we'll ask some more people who are at that meeting.
Yes.
So I want to just clarify, how did you learn about the decant?
Through the IMT groups.
But you weren't at the meeting that immediately followed on the day of the decision?
Probably it's the subsequent meetings.
Well, let's go look at that. There's a meeting on the 20th of September. That's page 370. And you're not recorded as being present there. So how about the 8th of October? That's page 373. Are you present at that meeting?
No, don't believe so.
So I just want to check, could it be that you learnt what you've reported in your statement from some other means rather than being present at the IMT, perhaps being told by somebody?
It's possible.
Right,
yes.
Okay, that's really helpful. Thank you. Now, looking at the time, I think I've got time to do this. I'd like to look at your statement at paragraph 55, where we deal with portable HEPA filters, which is on page 151. Now, maybe I'm out with your skill set here, so please tell me, but what is your training level in respect to ventilation systems?
I don't have any formal training in ventilation systems.
Well, we'll just ask you what happened and we'll ask other people what it meant. But were you aware that whether there was any validation or assessment of the efficacy of mobile HEPA filters before they were brought into the wards as described in this question?
Sorry, I'm not quite.
Well, it's been suggested to us that with a mobile unit, they're very good for some purposes, but where you put them in the room sort of matters.
Yes.
And as it was put to me by one of the inquiry's experts, they're often at exactly the place the nurse wants to stand because it's next to the patient, it's the middle of the room.
Yes.
And where you shouldn't put them is in the corner. And I wondered if at this time this was going on, you received any instructions or training or guidance about where these should be put and how that should be recorded or checked.
I don't recall that we actually discussed where they should be placed in the rooms.
They sort of just turned up.
No, they didn't turn up, but there was discussion about how we could reduce the amount of contaminants within the room.
Yeah.
And it was suggested that these mobile HEPA units would be a good control measure. They would recycle the air, they would sort of draw the air in and through the bottom, through the HEPA filter, and then discharge it again into the room. And that would reduce the amount of contaminants in the room.
But beyond that, there was no discussion about where to place them or these sort of things?
I don't believe there was any discussion about where to place them, no.
I'd like to turn now to the subject of chilled beams, which you cover in your statement from paragraph 57 onwards. Next page. Yeah, I don't think we need to actually go through it line by line, but might as well leave it up there while we're doing it. When did you first become aware of an issue about water that might have been thought to drip from chilled beams?
I can't recall exactly. I would say it was an ongoing problem that presented itself periodically within the adult children's hospital.
Is this something you'd ever had any experience with before?
No, not prior to my time at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital, no.
Were you given access to any guidance or training about how to manage these problems of dripping?
No, I don't believe it existed.
Elsewhere?
Yes.
Yeah, but it existed here occasionally as a problem?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
And what did you understand the problem or concern to be about chilled beams?
My understanding was that whenever environmental conditions presented themselves, there was enough humidity in the air and the chilled water passing through the chilled beam was at a critical temperature, then condensation would form on the coils.
Yes.
And that would then drip to within the internal unit and ultimately into the room.
So this is important about keeping it on the right side of the dew point for that particular.
Correct, yes.
And in addition to dripping from the chill beams, were you having any issues around dust or dirt?
Yes.
Did this cause any requirement for cleaning of chill beams?
It did, yes.
So how was that done?
I believe that a programme was implemented
So when you say believe, is this when you were there?
while I was there, yes.
Yes. And roughly when are we talking, the programme?
I can't recall exactly.
Could it be 2018?
Could have been 2018, yes.
So what's the programme that was developed?
So there was a regular programme whereby the technicians or maintenance assistants would go around, arrange access to the rooms, and then open up the chilled beam and vacuum the dust from the matrix within the unit.
Would this require to be done after an HII scribe?
There would have been a standing HAI scribe document in place for that particular piece of work.
And I take it the patient would have had to be out of the room?
Yes.
And would the room require to be cleaned afterwards?
Yes, I believe so.
So in terms of time, how long does it take for your team to go and clean a chill beam in a room where there's one of these?
I couldn't say exactly. I would estimate that to be probably about 30 minutes to an hour.
But the patient has to be out?
Yes.
Do you have to cover other things in the room?
It would make sense to cover other items that can't be moved from the room, yes.
Because we heard some evidence this morning from Mr. Clarkson about how you need to, if you want to remove panels to get to pipework, you have to cover sinks and bedding and things, and then you have to clean it all afterwards. It's broadly the same for this?
Yes.
Right.
If I can ask a question, when you said there would be an H-scribe in place, could you just maybe tease that out a little bit? This is being asked to carry out the procedure you've just described in relation to chilled beams. Now, what do you mean by an H-scribe in place?
So a high scribe
High-scribe.
is a sort of risk mitigation document. So the task would be described and any control measures required would be documented on that. And those would be implemented while the work is ongoing.
Right, so it's a list of things to do.
Yes.
Right, so the person doing it would look at the list and make sure he or she's going through the task. Is that how it works?
Yes, so that they have all the appropriate control measures in place. It would be almost like a method statement.
Do they then document what they've done or not?
I think it would only be recorded on their job ticket from the FM First system.
Thank you.
What I wanted to understand is what you understood to be the cause of the water dripping off, other than the dew point. Was there any other cause?
I believe on some occasions there was another cause, and that was due to it was either the fittings on the hot connections to the chill beam or the cold. I can't recall exactly. I think it was the hot connections, which had failed, had loosened off due to thermal expansion.
So if the hot circuit cools, then there'll be a size change and it will loosen.
Yes, so the tolerance changes and it could lead to leaks. Yes.
Okay. Now I'd like to turn now to the Mycobacterium chelonae IMT of the 19th of June 2019. That's bundle 1, page 320. Now it's a heavily redacted document. Let's just check you're there first.
Yes, I am.
If we scroll down to the action points for estates, which are, suddenly I decided not to mark my own copy, but I will get there in a moment. Yes, the bottom of page 321. So there's a report of a drain inspection. Do you remember this?
I do remember drain inspections, yes.
And so what was going on in drain inspections?
So there was I suppose a suspicion that the drains could contain different types of bacteria, and that somehow there was a route of infection that comes, could lead to the bacteria coming from the drain and finding its way onto the patients.
And this is in June of 2019?
Yes.
And this is effectively in it's in ward 6A, which is a general ward.
Yes.
At this point, it's the same as all the other wards, apart from 4B in the main tower.
Yes.
the same ventilation and water systems,
Yes.
except it has point-of-use filters on the taps.
Yes.
And in fact, I can now see the thing I was going to take you to, which is on the next page. There's a discussion here of various things which you're asked to do. Do you see that under risk management and control measures current?
I do.
Yes. So water samples need to be taken in ZootTech, say, with PAL filters in place and without. What's a PAL filter?
A PAL filter is a microbiological filter.
Is this the point-of-use filters we've heard about?
Point-of-use filter.
They're like a sort of ovoid thing.
Yes, PAL is the manufacturer and the
It's a brand
trade name. Yes.
Right. Okay. And then you are asked to go and speak to PAL and look at evidence effectively that proves to eventually prevent infiltration of atypical mycobacterium.
Yes.
And did you do that?
I did.
And what did you find out?
PAL returned an email to me to confirm that the filter was capable of retaining atypical mycobacterium.
Right. And then the suggestion they required to be changed. Were they being changed every 31 days?
Yes, there was a program in place to change them every 31 days.
And a discussion about applying them to theatres. Do you know if they were transferred to theatres?
Yes, they were.
Now, the reason I ask you all these questions is partly in order to get answers to those particular points, but also to ask what your role in an IMT is.
I would say my role in the IMTs was as a facilitator. So I would attend the IMTs and any actions that were attributable to the Estates Department, I would take those actions, take responsibility for them and make sure that they were implemented. So I would use the Estates team and delegate any of the tasks to individual members to ensure that they were completed before the next IMT.
Had you heard of Mycobacterium chelonae before this particular IMT?
I don't believe I had, no.
Were you aware of whether it had been anywhere else in the hospital?
No.
In a IMT, who is the source of information about where the infections have been in the past?
That would be either the consultant microbiologist or the infection control team.
Just the reason I ask that is that we've heard evidence that the testing results all go to Estates, and then they get passed on to microbiologists. But you as a team wouldn't, as it were, have a memory of what's previously been found?
No.
You'd leave that to the microbiologists?
Yes. Especially in the case of atypical mycobacterium, that is not something that Estates would be specifically looking for.
Because what are the mycobacteria that you are looking at?
Sorry,
what are the microorganisms that you are looking for?
Generally, we would look for Legionella, TVCs, or E. coli and coliforms. Beyond that, it would be instructed by a microbiologist if there was any suspicion of another bacteria in the system.
Now, I want to turn to your answer to question 109 in your statement. Which is on page, I think, 171, I'm hoping. Yes, it did. It's quite a short answer. We asked you, what do you understand about the management of water testing? What do you understand about decisions on when water testing should be undertaken? And you report decisions on testing were always issued by the IMT.
Yes.
Now, would there have been decisions made on other tests by other parts of the hospital?
For other bacteria?
For other bacteria.
Yes, that would, for other bacteria, it would always have been instructed by the consultant microbiologist.
Yes, because that's what I wanted just to check, that in a sense, I'm wondering whether you might have misinterpreted our question, because an IMT would instruct the things the IMT instructs, but there are going to be other tests instructed by other people, aren't there?
Yes, out with an IMT, there may be... I'm trying to think of an example, but there were commonly requests coming from either the infection control department or consultant microbiologist to sample for particular bacteria in specific locations.
And if, for example, the Acute Infection Control Committee or the Board Infection Control Committee would have wanted to start regular testing for a particular sort of bacteria, it might come from them.
Yes.
And if the lead ICD wanted to do that, they might come from them.
Yes.
By the time you had left, was there a standard list of out of specifications for water testing
I believe a list was being developed.
at the time you were leaving?
Yes.
Right, well, I won't ask you more about that. Now, this is about data. The epidemiologist instructed by the inquiry and the case notes review expert panel have made some relatively choice observations about the data quality as they see it, about the location data for water testing results. Now, I put that to Mr. Watson yesterday, and he's quite firm that when they can carry out their water testing, they complete a form recording exactly which ward, which room, which sink it's from.
Yes.
What system does the Estates Department have for collecting water testing results in terms of recording the location?
I don't believe the Estates Department have a system. It's normally outsourced, and it's usually DME who would carry that service out for us.
Is it possible that the consequence of that is that different outsourcers would use different systems of recording location?
Yes.
Could I do, just, excuse me, just so that I follow that, simple point, is all the water sampling in the sense of collecting quantity of water to be sent on to a lab, is all that sampling done by outside contractors, or is some of it done by estates?
I believe all of it is done by outside contractors, mostly DME.
Right. As far as you're concerned, all of it by outside contractors?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Now, I'd like to turn to the topic of Cryptococcus and pigeons. In your, I won't go to it, but in your questionnaire response, you explained you don't have expertise in ventilation. In fact, you just said that to me.
Yes.
So why do you think you were appointed to the Cryptococcus expert IMT subgroup, given that you don't know anything about ventilation?
I was asked to attend, so I did that. Again, the Cryptococcus expert group were taking actions from that group. There were items that had to be investigated. And again, I was a facilitator, so...
So you weren't there to contribute to the decision about whether there's a particular source, or...?
I wasn't being relied upon for my expertise, no.
Right. Well, I need to show you some pictures produced by Dr. Inkster in February of 2020. That's in Bundle 12, document 148, page 1236. Yes, we're in the right place. So it's page 1236. It's on the screen, yes. So this appears to be an email from Dr. Inkster to Marion Bain, who would then have, and I copied into Christine Peters. Now, it's a long email. I'm not going to read it today. I'd like to scroll on, please, to the next email. It's a forwarding an email. So we over the page? Yes. So it appears to be forwarding some earlier emails. So there's an email forwarded from John Hood. And then just at the bottom of the screen, we can see an email from Darrell Connor.
Yes.
Here are the pictures you requested. And then over the page, we should have some pictures. Yes. I wondered if you'd seen these pictures before.
I have, yes.
Right. So where are they of?
So I believe these are within the plant room on level 12.
Could it be apart from 12A?
I think it's 12D.
12D, right. And what do they show?
Pigeon droppings.
And the next one? Oh, we have to. I would jump out at this point if I were you. To the yes. What's this show here?
Yeah, again, pigeon droppings.
That's quite a lot of pigeon droppings, isn't it?
It is, yes.
I mean, you've had a pigeon party that's been going on there.
Yes.
Next page. Same sort of thing. This looks like staining or tide marks.
It is. I believe this was due to an external plant room door being left open in level 12 and rain driving in.
So you think it's rain driving in as well as pigeons?
Yeah, I think the water that's there, obviously the door left open has allowed the pigeons to come in. for an extended period of time. And also the rain has driven in and wet the floor.
Okay, next slide. How long do you think the pigeons were in there?
It looks like a long period of time.
So days, weeks, months?
It could be weeks, yes.
Okay, next page. I think there's a couple more. You jump to the next page, please. Thank you. And this appears to be a dead pigeon.
Yes.
And then there's one more after this. No, there isn't. Let's go back to the dead pigeon. How would you characterise the nature of the issue with pigeons in the Queen Elizabeth University Hospital or Hospital for Children the time you were working there? What was the issue you were having with them?
It was very challenging. There were a lot of pigeons around. There were a lot of roosting points, a lot of points of ingress, and they did tend to find their ways into the building, into internal spaces where they would roost and breed and nest.
So what sort of internal spaces did they find their way into?
Into roof spaces, into voids, behind cladding, all sorts of places.
They seem to be able to get in there.
Yes.
And I want to just say that it's not just they're just flying around and dropping dead in children's play parks. They're actually all getting inside the building.
Yes.
Right, okay. So I was proposing to show you, well, I will show you actually, Bundle 24, Volume 2, Document 50. So this is a report from GP Environmental, Document 50, page 115. Yes. So this is a report. So Frank Maguire, who requested, did he work for you?
Not directly for me, no. Frank worked for the Facilities Directorate.
Which is the cleaning side of the hospital.
Yes.
Right. And the date is this is after you've been there. It's a date in February 2021.
Yes.
And if we scroll down past the gulls, which is the first section, onto the next page. Now, I'm going to have to check my own references. I'm in the wrong volume. Yes, we go to volume 1, please, page 115. That's the same page. Yeah, sorry, it's volume 2, page 115. So this should be, so volume 2, I think, page 115. That might be volume 1. Volume 1, page 115. There we are. Exactly. Thank you. Yes. So this is a email works requested by Karen Connolly. Who's Karen Connolly?
Karen Connolly was the site facilities manager.
And so again, that's the facilities director.
I believe I've got her title correct there. So yeah, she was a senior manager for facilities.
Right. But not estates.
Not for estates.
So one that, just to be clear here, for our own benefit, the people who manage the site, keep it clean, operationally organise it, is facilities. The people who mend it and check it's working to standard is operations estates.
Yeah. Yes.
And that's the sort of division.
Yes.
Because it sometimes can get confusing if you don't know that. If we look at this result of this report from GP Environmental, who were GP Environmental?
GP Environmental are a pest control contractor who were appointed to NHS Greater Glasgow and Clyde.
So on the 8th of January, they reported to Ms Connolly survey recommendations. A very large population of feral pigeons are present spread across various locations of the entire site. The most obvious breeding site being the hollow beams and partially enclosed beams ledges below the helipad. And then below that, the sheer level, can we scroll down a bit? The sheer level of pigeon numbers are now posing significant health and safety issue in many locations of the site, including walkways, plant rooms, ledges around the hospital external structure, and within site loading bays. But you would include it behind cladding, access panels, and all the other locations you discussed.
Yes.
Thank you. I don't think we need to see that anymore. Well, Lord, I've got one more question. I'm going to suggest we have a short break to see if any of the CPs have questions.
Right.
Now, you were at the hospital for 4 years.
That's correct, yes.
During that period, are you satisfied that all information about biological risk posed to patients and staff was shared in a timely manner with infection control doctors?
Sorry, I don't know if I understand the question.
I'll rewrite it. During the time you were at the hospital, looking back at it from now, are you satisfied that all information that you and the estates team had about biological risk that was posed to patients and staff was shared with infection control doctors in a timely manner?
Yes, I believe it would have been, yes.
Apart from the DMA Canyon report?
Yes.
Because it does seem a little bit concerning that if the DMA Canyon report could have fallen through the system and ended up you being asked questions about it a decade later, when it wasn't your responsibility, because you weren't the manager for the building it was about, that you might think the systems weren't capable of catching it. And therefore, they might have missed something else.
It's possible, yes.
Possible. Lord, I've asked all the questions I need to ask, Mr. Purdon, but it may be my colleagues have questions they would like me to put.
Mr. Purdon, what I'm going to do is break for about 10 minutes just to check that there's no questions additional to the questions that Mr. McIntosh has asked you coming from other legal representatives. So I would ask you to return to the witness room and you'll be called back in about 10 minutes.
Okay, thank you.
Please,
Mr. McIntosh.
I have 3 questions more.
Right. Mr. Purdon, Mr. McIntosh will have, I think, just a very few additional questions.
So the first thing to start with is a mild confession. I was showing you when we were discussing the decant IMT minutes, at which you weren't present. Not really surprising. I was showing you minutes from September 2019, which you couldn't have been present at because it was some months after the IMT dealt with the decant. So, my mistake. On reflection, looking at the correct minutes from September 2018, you weren't actually present at any of the IMTs around the time of the decant, were you? We can go through them, but I'm looking at IMT 18th September, you're not there. And the following one on the 19th September, you're not there. Does that ring a bell?
I may have been on holiday at that point.
Fine. So it must have been that you heard your understanding of the decant from somebody else.
Yes.
And we'll ask some other people.
Yes.
Now, I want to turn to the topic of pigeons. In your statement, question 204, which is page 199, we asked you in your questionnaire, what is your view as to pigeon contamination in the plant rooms? And your answer then was the accumulations of contamination were sporadic. My observation was there was not widespread and significant contamination. And most importantly, it did not appear that the problem was out of control. Now, I've shown the GP comment.
Yes.
And I think you've accepted that there was a widespread issue of pigeons.
Yes.
So how can you reconcile what you've just said to the inquiry with this description in this state?
So, at the time, I was aware of the Cryptococcus infections, which would have been late December 2018.
Yes.
I had a walk around the plant rooms at that time. I believe I was also accompanied by Dr. Therese Angster and Dr. Christine Peters. And I took some photographs, and there were very sporadic areas of droppings. And just to put that in context, the plant rooms are very, very large.
Indeed, I've been in them. They're very big.
So I observed only a few droppings in specific areas.
So this answer is about December 18 in your eyes?
Yes.
Whereas the point I was putting to you was that over a long period of time, there was a significant issue with pigeon ingress.
Yes.
In the hospital, and you'd accept that.
Yes.
And when pigeons get in, they cause mess.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. And we counted that of the documents we've recovered from GP Environmental that relate to their work on the site, so just GP Environmental, and they're in bundle 24, volume 1 and volume 2. There are 166 reports from GP Environmental in the period before you left for the Clyde sector. And I'm not going to go through them all. We can read them. Why wasn't the scale of the issue and the scale of the work required by pest control reported to infection prevention control?
I don't know. Couldn't answer that question.
Whose responsibility would it have been reported?
Anyone who had identified that pattern. Although it's a lot of the calls to GP Environmental to attend the site were made by help desk staff members, by facility staff members, but also by anyone from estates who had noticed it. So the information wasn't joined up. So I don't think a pattern or the sort of scale of the problem had really come to anybody's attention.
Well, just to take an example, if we look through and see different names in the name of the person who has requested the works, would that be these different people that you're talking about?
Yes.
And are you saying there wouldn't have been a system for aggregating together the number of pest control call-outs?
Yes, I don't think anybody put all of that information together.
Why not?
I don't know.
I mean, you're at this point responsible for managing the building. You're paying the pest control people to come and clean your building. Wouldn't you want to notice that there was a problem?
Yes, with hindsight, yes, it should have been pulled together.
So this is another thing, along with the failure to notice the DMA Canyon reports, of a failure of a system.
Yes.
So how do you think pest issues should be reported to infection control?
There should be some sort of system or some sort of process in place that if it's noted that there's a pattern or if there's a potential risk to patients, then it should be highlighted.
And I suppose this question is, you're there for a period of time, you have two responsibilities while you're at the hospital over a period of time, and then you move on. And other people come in afterwards, and other people there at the time. So the fact I'm asking you this question doesn't mean I'm only the only question I'm asking. You're the only person being asked the question. But what does it say about the management of the hospital that these systems didn't exist to spot risk assessments not being done, to the number of pest controls and other issues we'll come across? What does it say about the management of this hospital?
To me, it says that there are clear gaps and there are improvements to be made.
And are you aware of whether they've been made?
Sorry, could you say that again?
Are you aware of whether they've been made?
I believe that improvements were being made at the time I had left.
And so in your hospital that you now work on, do you maintain the records of these things and report matters to your infection control team?
Yes, I believe we do.
So when you say you believe, do you do it?
Yes.
Thank you. I've got no further questions.
Really just to give me context for what Mr. McIntosh has been talking about. Mr. McIntosh refers to 166 reports from GP Environmental. Now, I have not as yet looked at them, but what does a report relate to? I mean, does it mean that, well, just give me a bit of context. What does a GP Environmental report, or why does GP Environmental produce a report?
I believe that what's being referred to would be someone has noticed a pest issue on site. They have raised a call to GP Environmental, and they have attended site and then given a report on their findings.
Right.
Well, we can actually see one that might be relevant, which is Bundle 24, Volume 1 at page 96. So is this a report that you instructed in August 2017?
I don't specifically remember that, but it's got my name on it, so I assume yes.
And so here we have,
yes.
The issue was about pigeons nesting under the link bridge at neurology.
Correct, yes.
And then they're reporting that the temporary netting has little or no effect, and there's fouling and feral pigeons, and then there's a recommendation of action.
Yes.
So whilst obviously I can't expect you to know as a surprise moment by showing you this now, in general, when these reports arrive from GP Environmental, is it the responsibility of the person who requests them to take them somewhere else, to action them, or to obtain authority to action them?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
So one would hope in this case that you said, yes, go back and clean it.
Yes.
But there wouldn't be a system to escalate that, to record that, and to notice there was a wider problem.
No.
No. I hope that helps one.
Right. So such a report depends on someone who might be any member of staff, any member of hospital staff.
Yes.
Thinking there was something worth reporting to the pest control coming, looking at it, and then recommendation and a price for action.
It may well be that they actually come out, action it, and then just create a report and submit that.
Yeah.
So it may already have been actioned. There may not have been a need for a quote. They may have just addressed it while they were on site, which was normally the case. If it was a sort of low level, maybe a fly infestation or silverfish, but any larger issues where there would be cost implications, they would have produced a report and a quote.
Thank you. Now, our legal representatives content that Mr. Mangintosh has asked the questions that were highlighted. Thank you. Mr. Purdon, you're now free to go, but before you do go, thank you very much for your attendance today, but also for the work that you will have done in preparing the witness statement. And I appreciate that that will be a lot of work. So thank you for your attendance, but also for the preparation for the attendance. But you're now free to go.
Thank you.
My lord, the next witness is tomorrow, and it's Mr. Lambert. It'll be taken by Craig Connell, Casey.
Well, we shall adjourn until tomorrow at 10. Thank you.